So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Nicola Sturgeon facing questions over a hard border with England, Scotland with England. So context: this is about if an independent Scotland rejoined the EU, there would obviously be a hard border. I don't know how I'm going to title this question in this video, but yeah, it might be a really weird title, but just bear with me. So speaking on BBC's Andrew Marr programme, the SNP leader accepted that there would be a border in an independent Scotland if it was in the EU, and there would have to be a hard border. Absolutely, there would have to be a hard border. From what I've read, the EU checks around 30% of consignments that are exported from GB to the EU. And the simple fact is that if the UK wants to export stuff like animal-based or certain plant-based products, there has to be a vet check and customs declaration. So if Scotland became independent, that would have to happen on both sides. I think from what I've read, most of Scotland's trade is done with the rest of GB, which is obviously for geographical reasons mainly, and obviously the ease of trade. It's a land border. It's not, you don't have to go by ferry and stuff like that. It's so easy to trade that predominantly Scottish fishermen's fish exports are taken to Dover to be taken to France. That's how much quicker it is to do that kind of trade. So context aside, let's go back into the article. But she said Scotland will try to negotiate arrangements to keep trade flowing freely. I mean, that's a myth. That's not going to happen. If there's a hard border would be like the one between I suppose you could argue GB and Northern Ireland, or between England and France. There would be a hard border there. There will have to be customs declarations. There will have to be things like vet checks on certain products. So I don't know why Nicola Sturgeon's trying to sugarcoat this. I guess it's fairly obvious. She wants independence and she needs to try and convince as many people in Scotland to vote Leave. But again, don't lie to the people, Nicola Sturgeon. I don't appreciate that. So opponents say a hard border in England would be dreadful for trade, considering that it's around 60% of Scotland's trade is done by GB and the rest is done with the rest of the world. Yeah, it would be quite bad for Scotland, but a lot of the arguments kind of Brexiteers made about Brexit, leaving the EU, are actual arguments that Scotland could make about independence, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. So the SNP wants to hold a referendum on Scottish independence if they win a majority in the Scottish Parliament elections on May the 6th, which I think is looking likely. Ms Sturgeon was questioned on the practical details of an independent Scotland rejoining the EU. She said, "Of course we want to keep trade flowing across the England-Scotland border, and it would be in the interest of Scotland as well, and we would work to make that happen. But again, the more the UK diverges from the UK, the harder it will be to do trade as easily with kind of EU countries, and that would include an independent Scotland if it joined the EU, or even if it joined the single market, to be fair." She said, "We will keep trade moving freely. We will comply with all the requirements of EU membership, but that means a hard border." Come on, mate. EU regulations set out that 30% of poultry, eggs, milk and fish, as well as 100% of live animals, need to be inspected when entering the single market, which is going to have an impact on imports and exports. Like, come on, don't lie to the people, Sturgeon. Don't do it. Asked how she would police such a border, Sturgeon said, "I am not denying what the EU regulations say. I'm not denying because of the absurdity of Brexit and all the issues are raised for Scotland completely against our democratic will." Obviously, Scotland voted to remain. Let's not forget that. "We would work as a country to make sure that for our businesses there is no difficulties in terms of their day-to-day experience in trading." But you cannot. What are you going to do to guarantee that? Because a lot of this stuff will be out of your hands if you rejoin the EU. So again, there are things you might be able to do, but there's not much. Most of the issues will be on the UK side, not on Scotland side. The rules are pretty much set out, like we just mentioned, 30% of consignments and 100% of live animal checks. So I don't know what she's going to do to sort this out. "We would work as a country," we mentioned that. Ms Sturgeon was pressured further on whether she had modelled the impact of Scottish independence on people's income. She responded, "If I was to do all that modelling now, we'd have to redo it when asking people to make that choice. But realistically, if she's running on a mandate of Scottish independence in these Scottish elections, then she should have done the modelling. It's fairly obvious why she hasn't done it, because it is going to be negative. But at the same time, I get it. She's trying to play politics, but she's not doing the best job of spinning it. Let's put it that way. I believe it's right to only ask the people to make a choice on that magnitude, on the basis of quality, up-to-date information. But the thing is, you're asking them to vote for you to get a mandate for Scottish independence right now. So surely they should have all the facts in front of them right now. Very silly from Sturgeon. Scottish Liberal Democrats Treasury spokeswoman Christine Jardine, rhyming name, said it was time for the SNP came clean on whether they are planning tax rises or spending cuts. I can't imagine them doing too many spending cuts because they are typically a left-wing party, but I can see tax rises potentially happening. This week has not only exposed the... Oh yeah, how would you do passporting for people in GB? Would they be able to go into Scotland freely, or what's going to happen with that? This week has not only exposed the SNP as desperately confused over the economics of independence, but revealed that they are contemplating a hard border with England. I mean, yes, they are. That's fairly obvious. Like, don't pretend this is some sort of nefarious supervillainy plot. Like, it's very obvious. Come on. SNP, the Lib Dems, pretty embarrassing even in Scotland. This would not only be dreadful for trade, but throw up barriers between friends and family. I mean, Brexit did that as well. So, this kind of argument is a bit dim, to be honest. Also, the fact that you can still visit people. I don't think you'll need a visa if it's a short-term stay. So, again, the Lib Dems, embarrassing as always. So, on the election campaign trail, the Lib Dems have been highlighting mental health support for police officers. Bit of a strange thing to be campaigning on, I guess. Party leader Willie Rennie said emergency services in Scotland were suffering mental health crisis because they were working under a government that was distracted. That's a dig at the SNP, but surely you would argue for mental health services support for all public sector workers, not just police officers. The Lib Dems are strange everywhere, man. I don't get them. Scottish Labour, this is a guy who supports both Celtic and Rangers. A funny character. Saying it's reckless beyond imagining for the SNP to call for a referendum during the recovery from the pandemic while economists warned Scotland was heading for a jobs crisis. It is kind of irresponsible, but this is probably the best time to do it, considering that Scotland haven't, I think, done the best job dealing with COVID, but they were hamstrung to an extent by Westminster government, so not the best argument from Labour. Ian Murray said, hearing the casual way in which Nicola Sturgeon dismisses those independent experts that she is so fond of quoting when they agree with her, and a failure to answer any of the tough questions on separation from its effects on the border is playing fast and loose with people's future. I mean, what I would ask these other parties are, what are you going to do to help boost Scotland's future? Because you don't really offer much, because the Scottish Parliament is very hamstrung by the Westminster Parliament. They are very limited in a lot of things they can do. That's why I think they would have been smarter if they went for the Devo Max option in the original referendum. Scotland deserves better. Scottish Labour is opposed to independence and a second referendum. I'm sure you're going to be really popular there. So Anna Sarwar, who is the Labour leader in Scotland, said Labour could hold the SNP to account and ensure that the next Parliament was focused on the national recovery. I mean, what are you going to do about it, though? What are your policies? Douglas Ross, not Douglas Moray, that I've called him wrongly in the past. Douglas Ross said Miss Sturgeon's plans for a post-referendum border with England would be a hammer blow for Scottish businesses. I mean, do you know what's a hammer blow for certain Scottish businesses? Brexit. But you're a bit quiet on that, aren't you, pal? But Nicola Sturgeon's own admission, the SNP are clueless about the economic impact of independence. I mean, I don't think they're clueless. They probably looked at the numbers and were like, let's not do this. Let's not do the forecast right now. They have done no analysis on how many jobs it would put at risk or how much damage it would be done to Scotland's economy. I mean, your party haven't done that for Brexit. There's no impact assessment on Brexit, so I would get off your high horse if I were you, Douglas Ross. She floundered and didn't have a single convincing answer to dispel the overwhelming evidence that Scotland from the rest of the UK would be devastating for jobs and businesses. Are you saying that Scotland can't do it on their own? Are you saying that Scotland will be weaker for leaving the Union? Because what about sovereignty and all that good stuff that your guys, not you, Douglas Ross specifically, but your party, the Conservative Party, campaigned on? Is that all gone out the window now? Meanwhile, the party has been campaigning on the need to protect Scottish jobs and the economy by reopening safely at a slightly faster pace. I mean, you can do that, but if you open too quickly, then you're going to risk going into another lockdown. So that's why you've got to be careful at this point. Scottish Greens doing litter picking, which, respect to the Green Party, but come on, guys. Scottish Greens have been focusing on pointless plastics in their campaign, with the party pledging to phase out non-essential plastics by 2025 in a move towards a circular economy. So I think they want to move it to a more kind of inward economy with less kind of imports and exports, I suppose, to help help reduce climate change. The Scottish Greens will deliver a dramatic reduction in the use of single plastics where sustainable alternatives were available. I mean, I'd be running on green energy if I were them, but very strange. So Sturgeon, she's being a bit tricky. I'm not going to lie. But I kind of get why Scots want independence, or some Scots do anyways, because they vote consistently for the SNP, which are typically a left-wing party. I know that the Conservatives are the second major party in Scotland, but I suppose left-wing voters would be torn between the SNP and the Labour Party, whilst Tory Party don't compete with anyone, and Liberals will vote for, kind of centristy people will vote for the Lib Dems if you're a bit boring or you live in a certain seat. But I get it, in the case of Scotland, they voted typically for the SNP, and they've gotten consistently conservative, a conservative party in Westminster that have done a lot of damage to the country. Austerity is typically not a left-wing policy. I can't tell you a lot about how the SNP have run the Scottish Parliament and Scotland as a whole. I haven't done enough research into it. It's not something I'm super interested in. If Scotland gets independence or not, I'm not super fussed about it, but I'd rather they do what they think is best for their country, because in this case, they can use those arguments of sovereignty and deciding their country's future, because the UK as part of the EU had a lot more influence than Scotland does as part of the UK. The EU had the veto. We had a good amount of MEPs. It was our choice to send a load of idiots there. But, when it comes to Scotland, they don't have a massive amount of MPs within Parliament. Yes, they are the third biggest party, but that's mainly down to the collapse of the Lib Dems. Also, the fact that they don't have things like a veto. So they don't have that much influence. If Britain wanted to implement a dodgy policy like austerity, they can't really stop that. There's not a lot they can do. If Britain starts diverging from EU standards when it comes to food standards, Scotland can't do much about that. So I kind of get it. But either way, I don't mind if Scotland stays a part of the Union or doesn't. I do want to visit Scotland at some point. The Highlands, the mountains and stuff, it's always a place I wanted to go to. But, the only thing that I ask for people like Nicola Sturgeon, don't lie to people. Just don't. Stop it. I'm guessing they've done some impact analysis. They've looked at the numbers and it probably doesn't look good, so they don't want to release anything. Or they've chosen not to do the numbers because they know it's going to be bad. But in this case, I would support Scotland. There is people think that there's some sort of weird kind of mental jiu-jitsu you have to do to support Scotland, joining the EU, but also wanting independence. That's not the case. An independent Scotland would have far more influence on itself and its future rather than as part of the UK. That's, even if Scotland rejoined the EU, there are issues where they would have to go to EU standards on. But they would still have far more control than they do right now as part of the UK. So look, I've rambled on a lot. Hopefully this video made sense. Sorry, just a quick addition. A point I wanted to make actually, which is that Scotland's most of Scotland's trade, yes, it is done with the UK, but also the fact that a lot of trade does go from Scotland to through England into the EU into France. That's through the Dover-Calais crossing. So it would be interesting to see what would Scotland do in that respect, because they would have to beef up their ports. Because if you look here, they do have a decent access via the North Sea into places like Denmark. Obviously, Norway is not part of the EU. You've got access to the Netherlands down here. They would have to potentially bypass. I don't think they'd have to bypass Northern Ireland actually, because Northern Ireland has goods, free movement of goods in from the EU. So it would be interesting to see what Sturgeon would do to kind of reduce the dependency of goods flowing through England into the EU, and also which countries Scotland will start trading with more, because you've got ports obviously here, it would be in Aberdeen and these kind of areas here, and they would have to send goods to places like Denmark. Obviously you've got Germany down here. You'd probably have a couple ports around these parts. So it would be interesting to see what an independent Scotland would actually do to boost trade and its kind of reliance on using England as a bridge towards the EU countries like France and potentially Spain. So stuff you want to see. So I would be interested to see what kind of Nicola Sturgeon's proposals were. And I'm sure we'll see that in the coming years if they manage to get a majority within the Scottish election. So look, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.